Uh-oh, Auburn. He's back. And he's sitting there in Fayetteville waiting for you just like a spider. It's my Gone with the Wind reference that I love to go to. In these type of situations, it's that time of year. We've got coaches coaching to keep their jobs, to save their jobs, to get the interim tag removed from their jobs, and other coaches trying to coach their teams while other people are chasing them and trying to get them to change jobs. And it sounds like there's some exciting news happening maybe on the Florida front, and Gatorbait Media, of course, will be all over that. So make sure you stay tuned to them and all of their channels, all of their forums, their website, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Those guys will be all over this Florida coaching search, which, of course, everyone thinks is zeroed in on one Lane Kiffin, who, of course, could be the Auburn coach right now. Could have been the Auburn coach a few years ago when they were looking for a replacement for the infamous Brian Harsin, and Auburn thought he was coming. He gave them lots of indications he was coming, and then at the last moment, family tugged on his heartstrings, and he decided to stay in Oxford. Not sure that's going to be the same outcome this time, with Florida in full pursuit of Lane Kiffin. But we're going to focus on this state, the state of Alabama, on what's happening with the games this weekend, possible coaching searches, where we stand on all of those fronts here on Scarbo Knows. I am, of course, Scarbo. I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the way you've helped this show grow. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That we definitely appreciate that. Say thank you to executive producer Brendan Martin. As usual, he's juggling lots of journalistic tasks at the moment. And a special thank you to our sponsor, Money Management Services. They've been in business in Birmingham since 1992. The Rice family. They can handle any of your financial needs. They're a family-owned business. They're a fee-only financial services firm. You need some retirement advice? Give them a ring. They will take great care of you. As I said, I've known them for years. A great family. We'll hear more from them later in the show. So let's get to it. Why is it that at so many critical junctures in Auburn football history, and also at one critical juncture in Alabama football history, that the name Bobby Petrino surfaces? What's the old joke? I've used this before. It's one of my favorites. That I think Robin Williams is the one who came up with it. That when there's a nuclear explosion, a thermonuclear war, the only things that are going to survive are cockroaches and Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. I think we might be able to add Bobby Petrino to that list. Given that everything he's been through, and he's still coaching in the SEC, you have to admire his stick-to-itiveness, I suppose. Obviously, Auburn's going to Fayetteville on Saturday, play one of those early games, which usually favor the visiting teams because the home crowd hasn't had a chance to get lathered up, hasn't had a chance to get its game faces on, get its drink on, whatever people do to get ready and fired up for SEC home football games. But can you give Auburn an advantage in any way in any football game these days after losing the last four, and especially against that man, Bobby Petrino? And if you've forgotten, Petrino used to be the head coach at Arkansas back in the day, back in those years, 2008 through 2011, until he got on a motorcycle and departed the motorcycle in a rough way, in a damaging way in so many ways. He was quite good. The Hogs got better every year. Their record improved season after season when he was there. And obviously, as members of the old SEC West, they played Auburn every season. It did not go well for the Tigers. And you could see the scores there. And this is one of those moments I mentioned, the key moments in Auburn history. 2008, Tommy Tuberville made the unfortunate decision to hire Tony Franklin as his offensive coordinator, go to the spread offense. The only problem was Tony Franklin was good at what he did. The problem was Tuberville didn't get buy-in from his offensive staff before bringing in Franklin. There was a lot of friction, shall we say, in that relationship. It didn't go well. That was the year, of course, of Auburn 3, Mississippi State 2. But in the game that I thought it then, I think it now in hindsight, that really turned the tide against Tuberville was when Arkansas, coached by Bobby Petrino, went into Jordan-Hare Stadium and beat Auburn 25-22. And, of course, Petrino was one of the villains of Jetgate 5 years earlier when Auburn fired Tuberville, just neglected to tell him initially while they were arranging a deal with Bobby Petrino. The way these things work, it's funny now in hindsight to look back at it and realize the outcry, the outrage, the uproar that Jetgate sparked. Oh my gosh, get my smelling salts. You mean to tell me a school with a coach on the hot seat wanted to talk to another coach that they wanted to hire to replace that coach? Now, that was a little bold on Auburn's part. It was also unnecessary. Petrino was coming. He was going to take the job. And yet, the Auburn president at the time, William Walker, insisted on meeting Petrino in person. And Petrino had a job at the time. He was a head coach at Louisville. And, of course, he can't come to Auburn. He can't even really meet at a neutral site because they were still in their season. Auburn was still in its season. So a contingent of Auburn decision makers led by the president got on a private plane, flew to an airstrip across the river from Louisville, and they met surreptitiously, they thought, with Bobby Petrino. The news came out, blew up the whole plan, and Tommy Tuberville was embraced by Auburn fans in a way that he had never been up to that point, and he really wouldn't be until he started beating Alabama year after year after year after year, 6 straight in all. So Petrino comes back, he gets the Arkansas job, and what does he do? He beats Tuberville, helps push him towards the door. The next year, he greets Gene Chizik. In his first year at Auburn, they played in Fayetteville, and Arkansas smoked them 44-23. The one win that Auburn notched against Bobby Petrino's Arkansas program the first time around was in 2010, and Auburn had a quarterback named Cam Newton. That game, I covered that game. I was at that game. 65-43 was the final score. So even in defeat, Petrino's offense hung a lot of points on the Auburn defense. And then the next year, of course, without Cam Newton at quarterback, Arkansas got the better of Auburn again in 2011, 38-14. So Petrino was 3-1 against the Tigers during that stretch. All right, you could say that's a long time ago. That's irrelevant now. And you're probably right in some measure. However, if you compare the head coaches now, first of all, you've got 2 head coaches that are coaching to keep their jobs. Obviously, Hugh Freeze would like to stay at Auburn. He's got to win some games, or he will not be the Auburn coach in 2026. I'm not sure how many games he has to win, or if there is even a number that will keep him at Auburn going into next year. We've talked about this a lot. I think it's not an unlikely scenario that he will resign for health reasons when this season's over, and Auburn allows him to go out with some grace, pays him his entire buyout, which is between $15 and $16 million, and goes and gets another coach who can compete in the SEC. Far better than Freeze has. But look at this season, all right? You don't want to look back. Let's look at now. Let's focus on the present. And Arkansas, to this point, has played 3 SEC games. The first of those against Ole Miss, Petrino was simply the offensive coordinator. And the final score, yes, Ole Miss won, but it was 41-35, and Arkansas was driving late to take the lead when they fumbled. And then Petrino becomes the interim coach after the Notre Dame debacle in Fayetteville. And yes, they lost to Tennessee, but it was a close game, and they hung 31 points on the Vols. Then they played Texas A&M last week. And yes, Arkansas lost again. I think I got that score wrong. I think it was 45-42. Actually, the score on the screen is wrong. Get me rewrite. It was Texas A&M 45, Arkansas 42. So what does that tell you? Yes, it was 45-42. That's my mistake on the graphic. So, what does that tell you? Teams coached by Bobby Petrino will score points. Teams coached by Hugh Freeze are not scoring points. Look on the other side of the ledger. Auburn this year has lost all 4 of its SEC games. And then those 4 games against Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Missouri, Auburn has scored 17, 10, 10, and 17 points. That's 54 points total. And if you average their points in SEC games this year, it is a mismatch. It is a total mismatch. Arkansas is averaging 36 points a game in its 3 conference games this season. And Petrino's been there for each. He's been calling the plays for each. Yeah, he was the offensive coordinator in the first one, but he's been the interim head coach in the last 2. He's still calling plays. He's still running the offense, and they're rolling up points. Meanwhile, Auburn, with Hugh Freeze calling plays, running the offense, making the decisions at quarterback, Auburn's averaged 13.5 points a game against SEC opponents this year. That is not good. That is not about to play a team that has proved points. And for every Auburn person that's trying to rationalize this record, this turnaround from 3-0 to 3-4, this 4-game losing streak, the 3rd straight year that Hugh Freeze has started 0-4 in the SEC at Auburn, which had never happened to the Auburn football program before, not even under the immortal Earl Brown back in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s. Look at who Arkansas has played. Yes, Auburn has played 4 ranked teams, 4 good teams. Look who Arkansas has played. Tennessee, pretty good. They're ranked. Ole Miss, pretty good. They're ranked. Texas A&M, pretty good. They're ranked also. So there is not any disparity in the strength of the schedule within the conference that these 2 teams have played. And if you want to go out of the league, Arkansas's non-conference opponent, big-name non-conference opponent, Notre Dame, is certainly better than Auburn's big-name non-conference opponent, Baylor. So, what conclusions can we draw from this? And then we add into the mix that, okay, Hugh Freeze said this week that he is getting all 3 quarterbacks ready to play. And that if they need a spark at that position, he won't hesitate to look for that spark somewhere else beyond the starter, Jackson Arnold. Maybe it'll be Ashton Daniels, the veteran transfer from Stanford. Maybe it'll be Deuce Knight, the 5-star freshman. That remains to be seen. What I think is pretty clear is Auburn is going to have to score some points to win this game. You can't score 17 points and beat a Bobby Petrino team. It's not doable. As good as DJ Durkin's defense has been, they are not one of the top 5 or 10 defenses in the country, maybe in a category or 2, but they've been good. Don't get me wrong. And Auburn in games when Auburn's has just been a no-show. When Auburn can't stay on the field for more than 3 downs at a time. When Auburn can't complete a forward pass. When Auburn abandons the running game. When the running game becomes Jackson Arnold. Despite all of that, DJ Durkin's defense is a really, really good job. And by the way, I know I've heard it from some Auburn fans, who the majority of which are ready to move on from Hugh Freeze. Let's be honest. And when you lose the fan base, I don't care what you've done in the past. I don't know that there's anything you can do in the future to get them back. When they have turned away and tuned out, not in the sense that they're staying away from the stadium on Saturdays, because Auburn fans, as we've said many times, are extremely loyal. And no matter how much doom and gloom is hovering above Jordan-Hare Stadium, they're going to be in those seats or standing in front of those seats trying to lift their team and push it toward a victory. They've done it each game in this losing streak, each home game in this losing streak. And I suspect when they play Kentucky next week, and Auburn gets another night game. Auburn ought to feel good about that. Night games are different all across the league, and certainly that's true at Auburn. So they get another night game against Kentucky. If they lose to Arkansas, I imagine there'll be a full house. That's just the way Auburn fans roll. But at some point, you've got to reward their loyalty, and it's not happening. And so that's why I believe, and most people that you talk to realize this, the Auburn fan base is ready for a change. Doesn't mean they won't keep cheering for their team. It doesn't mean they're cheering for their team to lose to hasten Hugh Freeze's departure. That just is it's a distasteful thought in my mind. Rooting for your team to lose to get rid of the head coach sooner. But sooner or later, Auburn's going to have to make a decision. And the fact that you're about to play an Arkansas team coached by Bobby Petrino, we've been through this before. I mean, what is it about Arkansas that they have been a tusk in Auburn's side? 3 of the last 4 Auburn coaches that got fired lost to Arkansas in their last year. Happened at Tuberville against Petrino in 2008. Happened to Chiswick against interim coach John L. Smith, who was replacing, on a temporary basis, Petrino after his motorcycle crash and burn. And then it happened in his very last game to Brian Harsin. That was his farewell to the Auburn football program. He lost to Arkansas. So there's a weird thread running through Auburn's coaches in their final seasons. And then you can amplify that by a trillion when Petrino is coaching. Because again, like I said earlier, Petrino shows up like, I don't know, he's like, he's a Forrest Gump type of character who just shows up at famous moments in history, but in this case, at Auburn history. And if you really want to go back, you remember the Woody Allen movie? Anyone remember the Woody Allen movie Zelig? This weird character, Zelig, who showed up at famous moments in American history. And at one point, he utters the famous line, "It just goes to show what you can do when you're a total psychotic." Can we apply that description to Bobby Petrino? I'm not sure. That's probably over the top. But what I do know is that he was there at Jetgate. He was one of the villains. He was there in 2008, helped push Tuberville out the door. His interim replacement, John L. Smith, helped push Gene Chizik out the door. And then, and we're going to talk about coaching changes. We have to. That's the season we're in. It's Jimmy Sexton season, as we said the other day. When Auburn was looking for a coach to replace Gene, remember they interviewed. Now, it's not very smart to interview Kirby Smart and Gus Malzahn, and there were a lot of reasons for that. And we're not going to get into those now. We've documented it through the years. You can find my column. You can Google my columns on al.com, which you can still read twice a week. You can also subscribe to the Birmingham News. I encourage you to do that. But Bobby Petrino, which shows you the stones that major college football coaches have. Think about this. A year after, there's Woody Allen as Zelig. Thanks for that. Thanks for that pop in, Brendan. It makes me chuckle. It's actually a really clever movie. If you've never seen it, I don't know where you can find it. I'm sure you can find it somewhere. But he's one of these guys that just seems to be in the right place at the right time for bizarre reasons. And that's Petrino to Auburn. Because a year after his unceremonious departure from Fayetteville, Auburn is looking for a coach. Bobby Petrino was interested in the job. Now, I don't think Auburn or any major college was going to hire him at that point. But he got a phone call with Jay Jacobs, then the athletic director for Auburn, and the search committee. And Petrino thought going in it was an interview, or at least a preliminary interview. It was not. It was a come to Jesus meeting. It was a scolding of Bobby Petrino for his sins. And even though Petrino offered at his own expense to fly him and his wife, after everything that happened, he was going to fly he and his wife to Auburn or wherever they liked to meet with the search committee and explain why he was a changed man. Of course, they declined that offer, and they were pretty much already decided that they were going to hire Gus Malzahn. So if you look at it that way, try to look at it through Bobby Petrino's eyes. You were embarrassed, and partly through your own actions, by Auburn during Jetgate, because of Jetgate. You were embarrassed, largely through your own actions, when you sought the Auburn job in 2012. So you can imagine that Bobby Petrino does not have a soft spot in his heart for Auburn. And you can imagine that a Bobby Petrino, who is highly motivated to win every football game he can from now through the end of this season, to try to remove that interim tag before his name to become the head coach at Arkansas again, despite everything that's happened, you can imagine he's highly motivated. You can imagine he'll have some tricks up his sleeve beyond his usually interesting, intriguing, successful game plans. So you can imagine Arkansas is going to score points. And the task will be for Auburn to keep up or stay ahead. And I don't think, if you're going to compare head coaches who call plays, who design their offense, who make decisions about moving quarterbacks, changing quarterbacks, Hugh Freeze does not compare to Bobby Petrino. They're not in the same league. Petrino is far superior to Freeze as an offensive play caller, game planner, personnel shifter. Any aspect of running an offense that you want to name, give me Bobby Petrino over Hugh Freeze every single day and twice on Saturday. And so that's why this is a dangerous game for Auburn. It's so dangerous because a lot of people thought that if they lost to Missouri, as they did last Saturday, that there would be there'd be a press release, a notification that Auburn was moving on. Obviously, they did lose to Missouri. You did not hear that notification. And on that note, and I'm just going to mention this briefly, I know a lot of people are talking about the story that appeared in an online publication yesterday about officiating in the SEC and one particular official. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to discuss it. I'm not going to link the story. Because I need to know more. There were some holes in that story. I'm not familiar. I'm semi-familiar with the website. They're not known for their sports reporting. I'm not sure about their veracity. I'm not sure how well. I don't know the writer whose byline appeared over the story. So I'm gonna hold off commenting on that. But let me just say this, because part of the offshoot of that conversation, and of course, some Auburn fans are all over this. Some fans of other schools are all over this. Aha! Just shows or confirms their preconceived notion about SEC officiating. I'm not going to go there. There will be time to discuss that. But I will say this, and I don't know if people are doing this tongue-in-cheek on social media. 5-2, really? Do you really want to look at Auburn as a 5-2 team, not a 3-4 team? Do you really want to put I know you've already put an asterisk by the Oklahoma game and by the Georgia game because of calls that occurred in those games. One call in particular in the Oklahoma game that the SEC admitted by the end of the evening that their officials had gotten wrong, which gave Oklahoma a touchdown it shouldn't have had. But do you really, really in your heart believe, even if they counted the touchdown against Georgia and said that Jackson Arnold had crossed the plane in possession of the ball, or the ball had crossed the plane in Jackson Arnold's possession is the better way to say it, do you really believe Auburn would have won that game? Even if they went up 17-0. And you could say momentum is a real thing, and Georgia snatched momentum at the end of that first half. Auburn didn't score in the second half. Auburn didn't come close to scoring in the second half. Auburn barely got a first down in the second half. They ran, 23 plays for 40 yards? So I find it hard to believe that had those calls gone the other way, Auburn would have won the Georgia game or the Oklahoma game. And guess what, kids? Life doesn't work that way. Football doesn't work that way. The scoreboard is not going to change. The record is not going to change. And if that is what saves Hugh Freeze, then Auburn is doing it wrong. If they are emphasizing the fact that those games were controversial, that there were some very questionable calls, and you're going to hang your hat on keeping your coach for another year because of those calls, despite all other evidence of the incompetence of the Auburn offense led by Hugh Freeze and the utter inability of the Auburn football team to overcome the adversity that hit it in the face. To me, that's more important, because that's what a coach has to do week in and week out, year in and year out. You got to deal with adversity. You can't get shook by a call or 2 calls or 3 calls or whatever number of calls it is. And by the way, in that story, they mention a number of calls that were reviewed, that were questioned, and there was a number given that were proven wrong. Were they all in one direction? Did all those calls favor one team? Again, a lot of holes in that story. So we'll back off for now, but we'll address it if and when more credible information comes out. And if Auburn wants to be credible as an SEC football program, if Auburn doesn't want to slide farther into the abyss toward the bottom of the SEC, they'll win the game Saturday, and they'll win the game the following Saturday against Kentucky. Those 2 pieces of evidence alone shouldn't save Hugh Freeze's job. But if you don't do that, if you don't beat Arkansas and Kentucky, 2 of the other teams in the league that have yet to win an SEC game to this point, that's a 4-team group at the bottom. Throw Mississippi State in there as well. 4 teams going into the last Saturday in October who have yet to win an SEC game. Auburn gets to play 2 of them the next 2 weeks. Auburn should not be in the conversation with Mississippi State and Kentucky and Arkansas to see who will be the worst team in the league. And the fact that they are in that conversation right now is another indictment of Hugh Freeze's tenure. But like I said, the worst team that you could face, the last team that you want to see, if you're the Auburn coach and you are on the hot seat, and Hugh Freeze is absolutely positively on the hot seat, the last team you want to see is Arkansas, because it might be the last team you see as the Auburn coach, and especially when that Arkansas team is coached by a guy who's become Auburn's nemesis, Bobby Petrino. We'll see how it turns out. I would lean Arkansas. I wouldn't bet. I don't bet. But I would certainly lean in that direction. Knowing the history, there's just too much of it. We'll see if it's too much for Auburn on Saturday. All right, that's going to do it for us for today. I'm Kevin Scarbinsky. This is Scarbo Knows. I feel like I'm losing my voice. I got to get it together. I got to do the pregame show for the high school game of the week this week. Got a home game, Woodlawn at Parker. Hope you'll check that out on Alabama Public Television. Hope you will check out my columns on AL.com. Hope you'll follow me on Twitter/X at Kevin Scarbinsky. And I especially hope that you will check out our sponsor, Money Management Services. Hear what they have to say next. Thank you. I'm out of here. Have a great day. See you.
Since 1992, Money Management Services in Birmingham has provided individuals and business owners with trusted, fee-only financial advice. We're more than advisors, we're your financial family. From retirement planning to tax strategies and estate planning, our team builds personalized wealth management plans tailored to your life. At Money Management Services, we treat you like family, because when you walk through our doors, you become part of ours.